everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. Today we are going to be picking back up with the rainbow bustle dress that I started a couple of weeks ago. That is this one right here. And if you watched the video from 2 weeks ago, you will know that the base of the skirt is done. I have also done one row of the shirred ruffles. I had been hoping at the end of that video, I think I mentioned, to get a smocking pleater to help me with the rest of the ruffles. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find any of those yet for anything less than like $250, which is not going to happen. I might be willing to go up to as much as like $100. That's it. Like, that's the max. Otherwise, we're just gonna do this the old-fashioned way, like I did the first row on the sewing machine. So while I kind of look for, you know, potentially another one to pop up on Facebook Marketplace or something like that, I am actually going to switch my attention to the bodice slash like overskirt drape this week. I do believe that they are two separate pieces, but I think that there may be some of the overskirt that possibly could be attached to the bodice in the back. Just looking at this, we can see like this line of the bodice shows the bodice is separate, but this part back here is definitely connected to the skirt. So the question would be, what does kind of the back of the peplum tail part of the bodice look like? Does it sit separately on top of the overskirt, etc.? So I'm going to do the bodice first and then the overskirt because that just makes more sense to me. Now, I am not going to do an exact copy of this bodice because there's an element of this bodice that I don't like, and that is this weirdness right here. I really don't like this. I don't like that. I feel like it draws attention to kind of the, you know, part of my body that I don't want to draw attention to, like the stomach area. I think it looks just very strange. I do like the kind of ruched shirred area up here, but I don't think it needs to continue down here. So I know I've just been having you stare at my really bad nail polish, but oh well, there you go. So yeah, we're gonna figure out how to kind of change that a little bit as we get down to the bottom of the bodice. But I do like the shirring that's happening in the shoulders and at the waist, and kind of the looseness of it over the bust. So overall, this bodice is going to be based on like a relatively simple bodice shape. I'm going to use my go-to Victorian bodice pattern. We are talking like a couple of darts here in the center front piece. The back is pretty standard. So yeah, I'm gonna basically make a mock-up from that pattern as the base of the bodice, probably using twill or something like that, depending on what I have in the stash, just kind of as the more solid base. And then I'm going to take my fabric that I showed you guys at the end of the last video, which is this cotton sateen from Cali Fabrics right here. And we are going to figure out kind of like draping it on the bodice, how we want that shirring to go, how much extra fabric needs to be incorporated there, because we do obviously need like more than just fitted at the bust, because it's going to be relatively loosely gathered over the bust. So I'm going to kind of drape that on top of the fitted bodice to get an idea of what that should look like, and then we will incorporate it together so that we'll have like the basically flat lining of the bodice as the structured twill layer, and then this over the top. The back is going to be simple though. The back is just going to be this flat lined to the twill, just like really straightforward. It's just the front that's going to be funky. And so we will be figuring that out together within this video. Maybe getting to some of the embellishments or sleeves in the bodice too. I don't necessarily expect to finish. It is 4th of July week this week, and so I have a lot of social activities going on. So we'll see how much we actually get done, but hopefully it'll be a good amount. And while I'm doing that, again, I'll be searching for a smocking pleater. If I don't find one, I might also just be working on more gathering and kind of going slowly with the gathering of the ruffles, because I still have 3 ruffles to gather, and that is a lot of fabric. So let's go ahead and jump in and start with the bodice mock-up. So actually, slight change of plans on what pattern I'm using as my base here, because my like go-to Victorian pattern that I have shown you in a whole ton of other videos, it really is meant for more of an 1870s or mid 1880s shape, where we're flaring it out over a crinolette or a lobster tail bustle or something like that, with more of like a a extreme tail, slightly higher on the hips, etc. However, a few years ago in 2022, I did make my natural form bustle gown here. Now, this has a front that is like all cut in one with the skirts. And obviously we've already talked about this is going to be a separate bodice. However, it is really like the right fit around the hips. So I have dug out that pattern, which half of it's here and half of it is kind of in pieces over here, and I'm going to make some alterations, recut this out as a mock-up that could potentially turn into a lining as well. The main thing, of course, is that we're taking this front piece that is oh so long, and we are going to cut it into kind of like a gradual point. It's a much like lower, deeper, slopey point. And then the other thing that I've been looking at is what is the back of this even supposed to look like? Because obviously when we are looking at our image here, we see a little bit of a side back, but we don't see the actual back. We don't get to see what the shape looks like. Now, I did kind of identify right here, I don't know that this is going to show up on camera. I tried to outline it in pencil, but the like slight, we're going towards a point sort of system here. And so I think what we want is kind of a low point in the back, which again, this is an awful picture, especially because I printed it in black and white, but really we're looking at like this shape right here. This is from a different fashion plate. And then we can kind of look at the skirt pickups in both of these fashion plates and kind of create an amalgamation of that with what little we can see here on the sides and kind of figure out the drapes from there. So that's going to be the skirt thing, but really this kind of low deep V, that is what we're looking at for the back of the bodice. So I do have to change the lines on this pattern a little bit because that one is really like a straight across and very, very low. So we're going to take kind of the low point of it and then point it upwards so that we are still going like to the hips, because you can see from this that, here's our natural waist, here is the hip point where it goes over the side. So this is still going to be low on the sides, even lower front and back. Again, that's why we can't use that other pattern, just because the shape of all of this. And the other thing that I need to do with that existing pattern is bring it higher up the neck, because that one had a little bit of a V, and this one, I mean, it's still a very slight V, but it's like a V as in we have a collar. So like it's gonna V to, here instead of like here. So yeah, that's the general shape that we're going for. I'm gonna go ahead, cut out that mock-up, and hopefully it will work out. All right, so I have the bodice mock-up on. There are definitely some issues, some which are easily fixable, some which are gonna take a little bit more. You're going to be hearing popping and booming sounds in the background of any of the clips that I shoot today because it is 11/18 on the 4th of July and all of the local idiots are out celebrating the death of this country. So this has been going on since 6, I think, at this point, and Cookie is majorly freaked out, poor thing. But I have a bodice mock-up to try on, so we're going to try to do this despite all of the popping noises in the background. So here is the bodice. I know you can't even see the bottom of it at this point even. I think this is very long. I need to do some scale math to figure out like just proportionally how much of the bodice should be like waist to bodice hem versus like bodice hem to skirt, or skirt hem really. So I am going to do that math and figure out how much it needs to be shortened, because I think it needs to be shortened pretty significantly, to be honest. I think I did it way too low. The other thing here is that obviously we are not getting the curve up of the bodice that really needs to happen, and maybe that is why it's looking so long, is because it's lacking the curve up. So again, I have to look at that and cut it off. Now I only actually wound up cutting new bodice fronts for this mock-up. The rest of this is the natural form gown that I made a few years ago. So in saying that, we knew from the get-go that it was going to be too long in the back. So we do have to turn that into the point, or I do have to turn that into the point. And again, I'm just gonna look at my image and kind of my like inspiration image for the back and just see where that should be. But I think that honestly that is like up here, it's really not very low. So a lot of this is going to get cut off, but I figured why waste the mock-up pieces that I already had, I could use them. Now that said, there is another issue going on in the back, which is the upper back is huge. I don't know what's happening up here, but it's like, it's very, very large. So of course this is the hardest place to fit because I can't even reach it, let alone mark it, pin it, etc. I can't reach it to see exactly where it needs to get smaller. I can just kind of say, okay, from like here until here, it needs to get smaller. So I have to figure that out and figure out which seams to take in, maybe multiple, maybe it's just one on each side. I'm not sure. There's a lot of them, so that doesn't help. But the rest of the bodice does fit well. It is just the excess in the upper back there and then figuring out the hem, I think that is the issue. The other thing is by not recutting the back, I did cut this like a much closer neckline even than what the back of the bodice is, which is why this isn't lining up over here. So I have to decide if I do want to increase the top of the back or if I want to drop this down a little. Again, I'm just going to really study the fashion plate a bunch and draw in lines with my friction pens everywhere and see what all has to change besides the fit on the back. The other thing fit-wise that I am noticing too is that this was meant to be 2 inches on either side, like where I've pinned it shut. There was meant to be 2 inches excess on either side so that I don't have to do a facing. I can just fold it over and make its own facing. However, there's not 2 inches on either side, particularly over here. This is where it's like really off. I don't know if you can see the line that I have already drawn in here, but there is a pink line and my pin line is probably 3/4 inch over from that. So I only actually have 1.25 inches approximately in like each side of the seam allowance here. And really, it's actually off the line, I think, just about everywhere except probably right up here at the neck where I can't see except looking in the mirror. Everywhere else, it seems to be off by 1/8 to 1/4, so it's not very much. But since I was aiming for that 2 inches, it is something that if I want to do the facing out of the bodice itself and not make an additional facing, then I do have to fix that. I haven't in fact fully decided whether this is like a button front closure or hooks and eyes. I think it's buttons. I think I am seeing 1 or 2 self-colored buttons that are doing this closure. So I think that's what I'm gonna go with is buttons. Of course, that said, I do have actually a lot of fabric covered button like forms that I can use. I think I had bought those in bulk with my last project, so that is good. So yeah, but this overall, the shaping at the hem is really the biggest issue here besides the upper back fit. So I'm gonna go ahead and fix all that and I'll show you what that looks like next. I don't think I'll have to recut new mock-up pieces, hopefully. So hopefully you will just see this fixed. Okay, so I was able to like reach around here and put one random pin in where I think it's really large, and hopefully that will tell me how much I need to take out because that's the best I can do. I also made a mark kind of where it starts getting too big, which is actually pretty low, and where it stops being too big, which is frankly really high. So I have a significant portion of the upper back to take in. I also went through and I measured the drop here. This is 9.75 inches from the waist to the hem. That's what it's supposed to be. Right now it's probably 13 to 14 inches, I would say. So a significant amount's coming off there. Over on the side, it should be 5 5/8 inches. So a really significant portion is going to come off here. And then in the back, I couldn't mark it, but I marked where the waist is, and down from there, it needs to be 11 1/8 inches. So I will be able to draw that on once I take it off. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and take this off now and try and fit the back a little bit better and draw in the lines. On the front pieces, I'm going to cut the lines. On the back, because I know that I have used this for other things and may want to continue using this for other things, I'm probably not going to cut it, but I might try to like fold it out of the way just so that I can visually see that sort of like almost like a beetle back. I feel like that's what the backs of this era kind of look like to me. They're very pointy, like an insect of some sort. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and fix things and we'll see if kind of version, 1.2 looks a little better. So I took in the back some, but it's not quite enough yet. So I took in like the side back-ish seams, like not the ones that are kind of the most center, the next ones over. And I think I need to also take in the ones that are a little bit closer to center. So I've now marked them in a different color pen so that I remember which ones are which, because I hadn't been erasing the other ones yet. And then the other thing too is that I did cut off the excess and I folded up the excess in the back. I think the back is looking pretty right. It's hard to say without having like the overskirt yet, but I feel like it is close. It still seems a little bit long. And then this, the curve isn't right. So I definitely want to curve this up more because while the length might be right over here, it needs a steeper curve going into it. And of course, I'm taking something that is being shown on a very like straight size, you know, drawing and translating it to plus size. And so the curves are going to be a little bit different. And it might be that I need to make things like a little bit higher potentially, not this high, but a little higher to kind of create a visual more steepness there. So yeah, I'm just gonna do a little bit more tweaking. And also interestingly enough, I haven't changed my corset or anything. Like it has been, I don't know, an hour or more because of just comforting Cookie and yelling at idiots setting off fireworks that are like professional grade fireworks 3 houses down from you at after midnight. Yeah, anyway, after I yelled at them, at least they stopped. That and me and lots of other people apparently had been calling the cops on them. In any case, the 4th of July is thankfully now over because it's 1:20 in the morning. I'm going to do a little bit more tweaking and see if I can get this fit perfect. I don't really feel like bothering to do this up at the moment, but I took in the back a little bit more. The back now looks nice, but you can see we're getting some sort of a weird thing going on between this seam and that seam. So I have to figure out what's going on there. I think it's mostly because I really changed the curve here. And I need to now, like, I knew that I was going to either need to cut off this section or increase the blue section, but I think it's that this seam still needs a little bit more tweaking at like the last inch as it gets to the edge there. So I'm gonna see what I can do. I don't know if I also need to do something to the shoulder, but it's like now the shoulder doesn't seem like it's laying, and it might be that fixing it there fixes the shoulder, but it might be that I have something to do with the shoulder as well. So I am going to tweak that. I did cut this up a little higher, but since this is not pinned shut, you probably can't really tell that. I also actually wound up taking in this dart about a ½ inch more by the very bottom because once I had cut this, it was actually like gaping too. So I just made that a little bit tighter over here. But yeah, so we just have a little tiny bit more tweaking to do. We're really close. All right, I took in this seam right here just on the floral piece, not on the blue piece. I kind of undid about 2 inches and then eased it over, and that was the only part that I changed. I didn't have to change the shoulder, and I feel like now the shoulder is fitting nicely. I have it all pinned in place. You can see I've got a steeper curve going on here. I still don't know 100% if that is like the curve, like if that is exactly right. That said, I think I am going to run with this because if anything, it needs to be curved up more. So I'm going to run with this and make the actual bodice like out of the blue fabric. I think I'm going to go ahead and recut this. I don't really think that I want this for the lining. I'm hoping that I've got some like white twill or something like that that I can use. But what I'm probably going to wind up doing is just not finishing this bottom edge until I also do the overskirt. And then of course the other thing that I still have to figure out, which I suppose I should do while we are still in this phase here, which means that I'm probably going to do it tomorrow morning because let's face it, it is 1:57 right now, is I have to figure out the shirring. So I have to figure out how much fabric I need to get that shirred look over the bust, because that's really what we're judging here is like how much fabric do we need here. Down here we just pull it up really nice and tightly, just like the shirring on the skirt that just gets really pulled up tightly, but up here it's like loose and blouson. And so I need to figure out how much fabric goes into that so that I can just cut it basically like extra wide. It'll be kind of cut extra wide, and then I will prep the shirring, and then I will attach that outer blue piece to the inner lining. That is the plan. It also gets shirred tightly up at the shoulders. So yeah, maybe I'll look at that really quickly and just see if I can kind of like drape that on myself and hold it up and see, because I would really love to not have to put this corset back on tomorrow and just be able to cut everything out. So since this is like pretty thick sateen, I feel like I don't want it super, super gathered. So I'm kind of thinking like this amount of gathering. It doesn't start until like almost halfway across the boob. I'm just looking down at the drawing right now, but it kind of starts here and then goes until the very center. So I'm just going to kind of figure out how many folds that is across and measure that, and then measure like how much that goes into in the bodice, and I will just cut it that amount wide. So that was 14 inches across that are going to basically be covering 9 inches of space. And so I'm just going to, I guess, cut it, what is that, like 5 inches wide, and we will gather it down from there. I've decided that since this is so much of a curve right here, it would actually be better to have a separate facing like seamed in than it would be to just fold this over. Because if I fold this over, it's going to get really just like bulky and wrinkled where it curves so much. So what that means is that I needed to go 1 inch out from this center front line. That's what this line is drawn in right here. It's going to go 1 inch out and then be cut. And then I'm also going to have a facing, which is then also 2 inches wide, and will follow the exact same lines as this. So I'll cut it using this pattern piece. But yeah, that's what's got to happen here. Of course, I guess it gets slightly complicated by the fact that this actually is getting extended the 5 inches for the gathering part, but we want this shape to be the same as what's on this pattern. And then the gathering part is going to happen in here between really where the darts are and where the center front is, because if we look at the fashion plate, the darts are over more than where the gathers are. Though I should add that that 5 inches then also does at least partially go up into the strap up here, because that is also where it gets gathered down into. The back bodice pieces are all flat lined with the serger, so let's go ahead and assemble those, then we'll turn our attention to the fronts. So now that the back of the bodice is assembled, we are turning our attention to the darts. And that is what I'm doing first on the bodice is the darts. And I've shown you this before, but just in case you've missed that, this is how I mark darts. So I take my pattern piece, which in this case is our mock-up from before, where I had already marked those darts as I was wearing them, and I put in pins at various points along here, especially if you have like a curve that changes or any sort of like irregularity, you want to put a pin there. And then I just kind of, I'm going to try and do this one-handed, but I try to kind of pull this up really quickly, which causes the pins to go all the way through. And then what I do is I mark a little dot with a friction pen each place where the pin is. In this case, this is the inside of the fabric, which is what I want. I do unfortunately have to do my darts separately with the exterior and the lining, which is annoying because I feel like making darts are annoying. But yeah, this is how this works. And again, the darts are done first, and then I'm going to run the shirring stitches and be able to pull that up and fit that to the other layer of the bodice. Slight change of plans. I really do want the darts to go through both layers at one time. That way I can access this for alterations easier. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm only going to mark little dots along here, because that will give me the idea of where the shirring needs to stop. And basically, instead of drawing in this line, which is just the approximation of where I added the 5 inches, this is my like, okay, dead stop. We can't do shirring any farther than this line. So I'm just going to draw in dots along that, not even the complete line. Yeah, probably not even the complete line, because I'm not going to be able to see it from the inside once I add the lining. And then I'm going to run my gathering stitches and then put this with the other piece and do my darts all together as one. I have sewn in all of the gathering stitches on the one side here. I decided that I wanted to try one first to make sure that they were right before going on to the next one. So basically what I did first, of course I'm on the wrong side of the fabric here, but I found where the waist was and I I marked that. So that's what that mark is. And then there is another mark right here. That's the waist. I took that off the pattern and I use that as my base stitch to go across. And then from there, these are all about 7/16 inch wide. They're a little bit less than half an inch apart. And I did scale math to see that this should be about 3.75 inches worth of them. This should be about 2.75 inches worth of them. And then up at the shoulder, it is about 1 7/8 inches worth of them. That's down, it's like starting, you know, past the seam allowance because there's a seam allowance up here. So yeah, not too many here up at the shoulder. Hopefully that's enough. And I am now going to pull all of these up and fit this to the bodice flat lining. And then if that works, I'll go ahead and do darts and I will run these on the other side. Right, it took quite a lot of finagling, but everything is now all nicely in place on one side. Still to do the other. This did work out with the caveat that honestly, I should have cut this just slightly longer. You can see it's kind of shrunk back because of the gathering. I should have anticipated that because that's just what happens when you put in a lot of rows of stitching like this. Luckily, we only lost about 1/4 inch. So this can still get into the seam allowance. It just can't get into the serging, which is what I normally do for flat lining. So I may have to put like a piece of bias tape or something to finish this edge once it's all sewn in. But you can see all of the rows of shirring right here, which look really nice. I am going to stitch a bunch, probably not all of them down, but I am going to stitch a bunch of them down through both layers just to keep everything really nicely in place. I'm going to wait to do that until after I put the darts in yet, which obviously I haven't done. I have marked them. I marked the darts first. You can see my light blue lines over on that side. And then down here, I did copy the original in that I used pleats down here. Now, obviously the original has those pleats that hang past that I just did not like. So I don't want to do those. These, I did cut this a little bit longer, which is good. So I'm going to wind up trimming it to fit the bodice edge, but I did just pleat this down in knife pleats. And then likewise, I also had to put a couple of tiny pleats up here because I realized that the gathering here, I mean, it was set farther over than the gathering up at the shoulder. And so it just needed that. I have been trying to figure out if I want to make like one more somehow here. But right now I've just left that as is. So I will need to kind of recut also the neckline. See, it's just a tiny, tiny bit off of the curve because I just pulled that over to make those pleats. But yeah, that's what it looks like right now. I am going to do the other one to match, put in my darts and put it together with the rest of the bodice. Both sides have all of the gathering stitches done. This side is actually fully done. You can see I've now done the darts as well. I have serged around the outsides. I basted here first, and I also decided to sew on every single line, top stitching each one, because otherwise I realized that like my normal trick of tying knots at the end of these wouldn't really work because my threads were lost underneath the fabric. So yeah, without like trying to pull each one up and do a knot on the surface side, I just decided to top stitch every single one. I was already top stitching like every few anyway, so it didn't seem like that huge of a deal. I also did the same up here. This is now ready to get attached to the back pieces. This one, I still have to do all that top stitching and all the serging around the outside and everything. This took quite some time, but at least, you know, it is done. So I'm going to do the same over here. I'll show you what it looks like when the bodice is together. Now I realized that if I press this seam all in the same direction, which is actually like kind of evening out the bulk because this is the thicker area where all the gathering is, then that part that is too short, it doesn't matter. Like it isn't there. You can't see the edge of it. It is all within. So I don't have to do any sort of treatment over it. If I want to, I could really like, I could whip stitch that down when I'm done. But honestly, it is pretty self-contained both sides. So there we go. Ta-da! We have a semi-finished bodice. We have the base of the bodice together. I think it looks really good. There is a tiny bit of wrinkling right here, which is either because the waist is just a tiny bit large right here in the center back, or it's because there is not quite enough room in that little tail. So that's something that I'm going to look at like as I continue, you know, putting everything together and as I continue with like the overskirt, etc., because there is going to be another layer that has to fit under here as well. And of course we have like the bustled up sections, etc. So that's why I mentioned earlier in this video, I'm not going to be finishing off the bottom edge of the bodice until I have at least part of the overskirt done, just so that I can see kind of, you know, are we the right length, etc. But the rest of the bodice fits so great. I love how the shirring and the pleating turned out. I think it looks so good. I'm thrilled with it. Like the pleating here, it looks so sharp. I love that it didn't go past the end of it. I'm really glad that I made that change. And yeah, this shirring, like, it's really interesting because this is around the same era as kind of artistic reform, and you can see how some of the mainstream fashions like this would have also taken things like the shirring that were such a big part of artistic reform and incorporated it into mainstream fashion. So I mean, shirring has been a thing that's been around for a long time, but because these two trends were kind of playing hand in hand at the same time, it's interesting to see the crossover. But yeah, I really love the look of it. I think it looks so pretty. I love the color too. Like, this is just, it's really exciting. I was worried that, you know, I might get sick of this project at some point. Granted, I've only been doing it for 2 weeks so far, but I know that I've got minimum 2 weeks, potentially even 3 weeks left on this project, and I don't want to be sick of it because the rainbows and everything, it's so cheerful. I want to really love this project when I'm done with it, and I think that I will. Now, that being said, of course, that is going to be it for this week's video. So next week, I am going to be continuing on with this project. I'm not going to skip around to another project, at least yet, and I am going to be working on the sleeves, are like the next main thing, or the first main thing that I'll be continuing on with next week. I'm also going to be doing the button closure, and then the embellishments like the collar, the cuffs of the sleeve, and good news on the shirring front. I am actually going to be able to use a smocking pleater for the rest of my pleats on my skirt. I keep gesturing over here because the ruffles are literally on the dress form next to this dress form that you're seeing. But yeah, Chris, aka Prince of Snark Cosplay, who is one of my friends and is a local cosplayer, he has so graciously allowed me to borrow his smocking pleater. So I am going to be trying that out for the first time in next week's video. I'm going to be continuing with the ruffles so that I can get the skirt done, because that's the only thing missing from the skirt at this point. And I also am hoping to be able to move on to the overskirt as well. That's a big ask. We'll see how much I actually get to, because with sleeves and the ruffles and everything, it's a lot. But I'm really excited by this project. I'm loving it so far. I'm really excited for how it's going to turn out, and hopefully you are enjoying it as well. Anyway, if you liked this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week, usually with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays, and sometimes with additional costuming or sewing related content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Jean and Kim. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!